The Wife of Bath's tale is one of the more interesting tales included in Chaucer's work. It can also be one of the more difficult. This is not only because it's in Middle English, which doesn't necessarily need translation like the Old English of the Anglo-Saxon period or the French of the Anglo-Norman period, and is therefore a little bit more difficult to read, but it's also difficult because of the anti-feminist and misogynistic tone that seems to be present throughout the whole work. However, it is important to keep in mind a few things when reading The Wife of Bath's tale, especially when you're reading the prologue. First, anti-feminist and misogynistic writing was not strange at this point in time. The Wife of Bath mentions Jovinian and St. Jerome. Now, Jovinian actually countered the conventional wisdom that marriage was only a necessary evil. He argued a couple of things. He argued that virgins, widows, and married women were all equal once they were baptized, that purification by baptism was basically immunity from the devil. He argued that there was no distinction between fasting and the grateful reception of food. And he argued that all who have been baptized and kept the faith, they received the same reward in heaven. He also supports this with several examples throughout the Bible. Now, we don't have access to Jovinian's original work because it's been lost in time, but Jovinian is quoted by St. Jerome as saying, "In case my opponents hope to put up a vain defense and claim that all this was because the early world needed populating," and he's referring here to them being okay with marriage, he says, "Let them hear what Paul has to say," and he quotes Paul. "Therefore, my wish is that the younger widows marry and produce children." And this is from 1 Timothy 5:14. He quotes again, "Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled," and it's from Hebrews 13:4. He quotes a third time, "The wife is bound to her husband as long as he lives, but if he dies, let her marry whom she wishes, only in the Lord," and that's from 1 Corinthians 7:39. St. Jerome is rather famous for his response to Jovinian's arguments. He argues, and his arguments are used as the basis for the church's arguments for clerical celibacy. His argument utilizes some support that's taken out of context or reworded in sections. He uses the quote, "It is better for a man not to touch a woman," and then argues that that means it's good for a man not to touch a woman. And he also uses Proverbs 6:20-35, where it's talking about adultery, as indication that any kind of interaction between men and women is not good. So this work would have been very familiar both to Chaucer and, within the fiction, to the Wife of Bath. She quotes it, she refers to it often. Now, while the Wife of Bath's tale seems, on the surface, to be kind of continuing in St. Jerome's tradition, arguing against this idea that marriage is, in any way preferable or okay, you have to keep in mind that Canterbury Tales is a work of satire. He's making fun of a lot of the traditions of the time. As you read the Wife of Bath's tale, especially the prologue, keep in mind that he is working within that tradition to highlight what's ridiculous about it. When you get to the Wife of Bath's tale proper, keep in mind that this is a frame story. Chaucer is writing this tale as if it were the wife telling it. What does the tale say about her and about the interaction between chivalry and misogyny? It's an interesting perspective to take, especially considering that it is set within this time and within the kind of culture where you can have long, lengthy theological arguments about whether or not people should get married. Let me know if you have any questions about this week's reading.